On Parent Connection, part one of a conversation about the 2020 census. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Parent Connection. I'm your host, Jen Lombardi. During today's show, we are going to discuss the 2020 census. Harry Freeman has joined us today. He is the 2020 Census Anne Arundel County Complete Count Committee Chair. Welcome, Harry. Thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Jen, for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became the committee chair?
Sure, yeah. So I'm originally from Miami, Florida. I did my undergrad studies in Tampa, University of South Florida. After graduating, I joined the United States Army. So I traveled around, went overseas for a little bit, and I wound up being stationed here in Maryland at Fort Meade. I worked in military intelligence while on active duty. And when I left active duty, I stayed here in Maryland, called Maryland home, and I started getting connected into a lot of the political circles and seeing what I can do for my community. And we fast forward a few years, and here we are in 2019. It was March, and I was in a parade walking with County Executive Stuart Pittman, and ideas floated around about having me chair the committee, and I agreed to do it. And it's been a wonderful experience so far.
Well, we are lucky to have you.
Thank you.
So, what is the 2020 census?
Ooh, so the 2020 census is it's a civic duty. It is a constitutional mandate. Article 1, Section 2 of the United States Constitution says that every 10 years we are to conduct a count of every living person in the United States. And that's been going on since 1790. The first director of the census was actually Thomas Jefferson. This was before his presidency. So this has a long-standing history in the operations of what we do as a country. And just a little fun fact, it's actually the largest peacetime operation that the United States conducts every 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
So we would never not have a census every 10 years.
We will. It is the sixth sentence of the United States Constitution. Before freedom of speech, before the right to bear arms, before any of the Bill of Rights, this is the sixth sentence of the Constitution. The framers of the Constitution, the founding members of this country are like, this is how important counting every single person is. It is at the very top.
So as a civic duty, it's important that I fill it out.
Absolutely, ma'am. Every
now,
single one of us. Everyone
what kind
counts.
of information do they ask on the census?
So this is the questions they ask are very simple. There's no trick questions. There's nothing you wouldn't know about yourself. And the question you're asking is very, very interesting because people get worried about the information that they put out there. But before I go into the details of what's on the questionnaire, your social media account has way more information than what the census asks. When you file your taxes to the IRS, you give much more detailed information than what the census asks. And that's on an annual basis. So every 10 years, all the census asks is to list every living person in your home, regardless of age. That includes newborns to the most elderly person in your home. They ask for birth dates, gender. They'll ask for education of each person. So it's the same questions for each living person in your home. And it's very, very basic stuff. And once this information is submitted and collected, the only thing that is taken from that is aggregate information. So specific names of the people within the household, that information is actually protected under Title 13 for 72 years.
Okay, so just to help our watchers a little bit, when you say aggregate information, can you break that down a little bit for?
Sure. So aggregate information is just very, very surface level information. We'll say home 123 Main Street has 3 people living here, and of these 3 people, the average income is X. The education level of, individuals 1, 2, 3 is 1, 2, 3. Graduate degree, high school, less than high school. It's just the most basic form of information that can be collected.
So they wouldn't say Jen Lombardi has an education level of a master's degree.
You would fill that out, but the aggregate data would not
So information
associate
they're
your
pulling would not.
right. It would not
say that.
associate your name with any exact data until the 72-year protection gets lifted.
Okay. So, and also from my understanding, it's been 10 years since I filled one out.
Yes, ma'am.
But they also collect information about your home besides your income amount, whether you own your home
Right.
or.
Yep.
Okay.
Do you own? Do you rent? This is important because different policy measures that go on, we want to get a snapshot of our communities, and that's why we're doing this at the county level. That's the level that I'm chairing. We have support from the state level. The state has their own complete count committee, and then of course we have the federal Census Bureau, which is part of the Department of Commerce. So at every level of our federalist system, we have people dedicated to getting these counts in. But yeah, every 10 years we fill this information out. Now the census doesn't lay dormant, for 9 years, and then they just wake up and start, working on this census. The census, the Federal Census Bureau, there are dozens of different surveys that go out annually, but there is only one that is mandated by the Constitution, and that's the one that goes into budgets. That's how they do projections for schools, for roads, transportation, infrastructure, business, and I can just go on and on and on.
Yeah, so we're going to spend a little bit more time looking at how the information is used. But right now, who is required to respond? So is it everybody in a household, one person in a household? What if I have a household with multiple families?
Excellent question. So the Census Bureau in mid-March, they're going to start sending out the questionnaires. The first phase will be an invitation to participate. And that invitation is going to be sent to a household. Jen Lombardi at 123 Main Street will not receive a questionnaire. It won't have your name on it. Okay. Just your household. It'll be an envelope from the census to the household of 123 Main Street. You'll open it up, you'll see an invitation. That invitation is going to be for the online process, and for the first time in the nation's history, you'll have an online option to fill out the census. So when you go to that online option, you'll see person one, and you'll fill out all the information there. But every single living person in your home must be included in the census. If you have a newborn child, put the information for the newborn child. If you have someone living in your home who's not a member of your family, but that is their usual residence, that is the place they most frequently go to sleep, to eat, to rest, it is their usual residence, they get included within that household as well. If you have any visiting family that spends extended amounts of time, if they are there when this census information comes, they get counted there. The motto that the census is running with for 2020 is count everyone once, only once, and in the right place.
Okay.
So every single person.
So let's say my brother's family is living at my house. Mm-hmm. Do I fill one? I know I fill one out. Do I put him and his family on mine, or can he also do one separately and count? Does that make sense?
The question makes sense, but again, the questionnaires will be delivered to a household. So it won't go to individuals. It won't go to any individual person.
So he should not go online and fill one out for his family and me fill one out for mine. We should just do one together.
One for the household.
Okay.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
That's perfect sense. Mm-hmm. Now, what if somebody is pregnant? So they're expecting to have a child. Mm-hmm. They have not had that child yet. Because the next census is 10 years away, should they count that child?
That is a fantastic question. So this question came up at a club meeting that I was presenting the census data, and there is a member of my legislative district whose wife is expecting a child just after April 1st. Mm-hmm. And I was saying, hey, if this child is going to be here April 1st, sure, count them. Now, The census has been doing this since 1790. They have their ways of crosswalking all this information with what they already have. Now, when it comes to newborns, you know, the circle of life, people come into the world and people leave the world at any moment. You know, it's just the way things happen. But April 1st is Census Day.
Okay.
However you most comfortably feel about filling out the census around that time, that will be the best way to answer that question.
Okay.
But if you're expecting someone and you want to boost those numbers and make sure that your child is counted for the next census, absolutely include them.
Okay. What if I'm a parent of some college students that live in a dorm, I don't know, maybe Towson?
Okay.
Do I count them? They live with me in December. They live with me during the summer. I call my house their house. Should I count them, or will they be counted in some other way?
Great question. The easy answer is they will be counted in some other way.
Okay.
So their dormitory becomes their usual residence. So on a daily basis, they will go to class. They will go back to their dorm. If they lived with you, they would go all the way to Towson. They'd come back to your home, and that would be their usual residence. But since they are in a dormitory, there is a different way to count them, and that is done through a group quarters enumeration. And universities have already received that information. That information got to universities, senior living centers, correctional facilities, just big places, barracks for active duty military. These areas get counted as giant groups.
Okay.
So February, which is where we are, that's where the census will go ahead and get that information out to areas like our local colleges.
So my child would not necessarily have to fill something out. The university would do so for her.
They will fill it out on behalf of you, but
Okay.
your household member is the usual residence, your usual residence.
Okay. Now, so I heard you say military barracks. What about deployment? And that includes deployed military too.
So yeah, there are a lot of complexities to these questions, but they're very important. So here's an example. I was stationed at Fort Meade. I was living in Anne Arundel County. I was stationed at Fort Meade. I was still a resident of Miami, Florida. My military home of record, I was still a resident of an area 1,000 miles away from Fort Meade, but I used Anne Arundel County roads. My son was born in Annapolis. I used the infrastructure here. So everyone who is active duty, the United States Naval Academy here in Anne Arundel County, they're in the county too, and they use our services. They use everything that our residents use here. So they do get counted here in Anne Arundel County. So that's part of what our committee is doing, going out and educating people that this certainly counts. If they're deployed, there is a way that their commands will count them while they are deployed. But for our deployed service members who have family here, their families should certainly participate in the county census when the invitation to participate comes to their home.
Okay, I think that helps me understand. When you're saying count everyone, you're counting everyone except if somebody else is counting them.
Yeah.
Like if a university is counting them in their dormitory, but if they're living under my roof, I'm counting them.
Everyone counts. Every
Okay.
single person counts.
Now, what if I'm filling it out and I count everyone, but then I get to a question, and I heard you before about the information is protected, but I really feel uncomfortable answering one particular question. Is the rest of the census not counted, or what happens then?
Good question. The questionnaire has to be completed in its entirety. If you submit an incomplete census, then you will get a reminder to fill out that question. And if you refuse to fill that out again, you will get another reminder to fill out this question. So people are constantly going through and making sure that each questionnaire is filled entirely. For our friends, families, neighbors, and strangers who don't want anyone coming to knock on their door to help them fill out that one question that might be uncomfortable with, just fill it out. just fill it out. There's more information about you on the internet that you would much rather not have. The census is not about getting that kind of information about you. It is the most basic information about who you are.
Right.
The
And
most basic.
thinking about that, I mean, maybe it's the amount my house is worth. I mean, that information is out there in multiple places through the tax assessment
very
process and the government. That information is already out there.
Yes, ma'am.
So I guess what I'm hearing you say is most of the things that they're asking are already out there in multiple places. So it's not a problem to fill it out.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Just to bust any myths about your data being leaked. My son is 5 years old. This will be his first census. I will be including him in my household. So the data for my son here in 2020 will not become publicly available until 2092.
Wow.
Yeah. So in retrospect, if any students in Anne Arundel County Public Schools want to do any specific census-based research, the most recent complete census that they can get their hands on would be the 1940 census.
Wow.
So the information you put, it will not be associated with your direct name and those members of your family or whomever is in your household for 72 years.
So if I rent, let's just make a scenario. If
Yes,
I
ma'am.
rent and I have two families living there, but if my lease agreement, I'm not technically supposed to have two families living there, I could still include on the census that there are two families living there without it being harmful to me.
Every single person, regardless of resident status, age, ethnicity, gender, race, religion, every single person counts. And again, if they're in a household and that is their usual residence, they
Okay.
get included. Yes, ma'am.
And that makes, I just thought about unaccompanied youth. So we have some students in our school system that their parents live either in different countries or different places, and they might be living with a relative. It's really important that the relatives count them.
Yes. So children 0 to 5 are among the most undercounted demographics when it comes to the enumeration process for the census. Children 0 to 5, that is a huge chunk of those that go undercounted. Now, ways that that affects a population is here with the schools. You know, we hear politicians and parents and students complaining of overcrowded schools, oversized classrooms, the student-teacher ratio being out of whack. This is how we mitigate those things. Traffic in the morning, school times, bus routes, transportation services. All of these things snowball if we cannot get an accurate snapshot of our community. So my son is in that demographic. He's 5 years old. The next census, you know, he'll be a sophomore in high school. I want to make sure that his time from kindergarten through his, halfway through his high school career, that he is taken care of. And the government that we trust to do, you know, X, Y, and Z for our residents are doing precisely that with the information that they have.
Okay. What if I am an undocumented citizen? And I know you keep repeating everyone counts, but just to make sure that people that are not documented understand, it's important that they're counted too, because
Absolutely.
their children will go through our school systems. They will drive on our roads. They will, if the house, there's tragedy in the house and the fire department needs to come.
You are hitting all these wonderful points.
Okay.
Yes, every single living person.
Okay.
And that's part of what our committee's doing. Our committee is committed to inspiring and motivating trust, building that sense of trust so people can fill this out. Because there is a financial piece to this that is attached to every single person, whether you're a citizen of the country or you're undocumented. There are some real world issues that we have to face when we don't count individuals. In 2010, the average annual federal funds that were dispersed to localities was $675 billion a year.
Wow. Wait, say that again?
$675 billion a year for 10 years So 2010 to until the 2020 census goes on. Now, what that means at the individual level is every person that goes uncounted, that's $1,821 per person per year for 10 years that our county will not receive because we don't know that they exist.
So, if I didn't count my daughter when she was 1 year old, and the next census comes 10 years later, what I'm hearing is $1,800 is lost for our county every year for 10 years.
If you did not count your 1 year old, the next census that came by, that was a net loss of $18,210 over the decade.
Wow.
Yes,
So
that could have been schools, projects, infrastructure, businesses, anything you can think of, hospitals, hiring more police officers, hiring more firefighters. You know, there is a public safety ratio that we have to think about too. You have a population of X. You need one police officer per X amount of residents. If those metrics don't match up, our police officers will experience longer response times to emergencies. They'll be spread more thin across scheduling. They'll require more overtime. They won't have proper resources. The counties and cities can't budget for increasing their pay and incentivizing more people to join the force. There are a lot of things that snowball just from one person. You know, $18,000 over a decade for one person. Multiply that by the last census. We figured that 80% of households participated. That leaves 20% of households in Anne Arundel County that did not. That's households. Now imagine how many people are in those households that did not. So on an individual level, there are some really critical measures.
So 20% of Anne Arundel County households did not fill out the census.
Did not in 2010. And it is our goal as a committee to make sure that we target those communities that did not participate. And we've classified them as hard to count demographics and populations. And that includes people at or below the poverty line, non-English speakers, veterans, our immigrant population, children 0 to 5, our homeless population, people who have unconventional housing. There are people who don't understand that are citizens, that are perfect, but they don't have the information in front of them to know the importance of the census. So we have a huge commitment to our community to make sure that we are not only educating everyone on what the census is, which this program is doing a wonderful job giving us this platform, so thank you, but also to bring awareness, just like I'm sharing these facts with you, to bring awareness of how important this is, but also to motivate people to participate. So those are really the three phases that I've established for our community: educate, bring awareness to, and motivate people to participate. And I hope people who watch this program do exactly that.
Now, how do they estimate? I mean, because if we didn't have 20% of the households fill it out, how do you know if they didn't fill it out?
Right. So again, the Census Bureau, through the Department of Commerce, they have multiple surveys that are done. The American Community Survey is one of them, and that goes out every so often, which has much more detailed questions. But that goes out to a very pointed demographic. So not everyone will receive that. So based on work that the Federal Census Bureau does with the United States Postal Service, with the DMVs and MVAs here in Maryland, they have an idea.
Okay. So they're kind of like triangulating the data to make sure, looking at multiple data sources and saying, well, this area has 62 houses, but we only received responses from 40.
Absolutely, and it's almost like photography. If you look at a picture that you took on a camera or your phone 10 years ago, and you look at a picture you took today, there's a real difference in the quality. You know, you have a clearer picture of that same photo. It can be a picture of you, but you get a better idea of the photo you took today than the quality of the photo you took 10 years ago. That photo might be of the same tree, but just to give you some sort of easy way to look at why we continue to do this is if you were to take a picture of a building 10 years ago, The technology of that camera, you'll see a little gray, a little more pixelated, but you take a picture today, it's much more clear. In 10 years, you take that same photo, it'll be even clearer, more resolution, and that's the whole point of the census, to get a clearer picture of our community.
Okay, so with only 3 minutes left of part one, maybe we can look at where are there certain regions or areas in the county? I heard you say demographics for those 20% of households, but where would we find those households?
So our hard to count populations, we've identified most of them being in North Anne Arundel County and West Anne Arundel County. And we've also associated why people do not participate this mainly with poverty. Okay. So there are areas of Brooklyn Park, East and West Glen Burnie, Curtis Bay, that we are putting a lot of our resources in the county to making sure we can count those people. Down in South County, the Adeel area in South County, that's another area that we're putting a lot of our resources and personnel and county department heads and their staff to assist us in bringing this education, awareness, and motivation to participate in the 2020 census.
Could you share a little bit more with me about what that education looks like? So I live in north end of the county, and are you guys out at community events, or how do you do that?
So we've partnered with community events. People ask us to speak all the time. We go to faith-based organizations and speak to their congregations. Regardless of religion, we go and we speak to them. We have pamphlets, flyers, PSAs. Actually, the Anne Arundel County Public Schools, they'll be putting together a PSA that will highlight all the languages in their curriculum, plus languages that are native to the student population of our county. So we are putting messaging out there, flyers, going in person. Centro de Ayuda, the Center for Help that's based in Annapolis, they're going to be doing a door knocking campaign to get people in these hard to count demographics to be like, oh, all right, well, I trust this organization, and if I trust this organization, I should trust filling out what's in the census. So that's how we're doing this.
Okay, and did you guys also research, like go out and ask people why they didn't fill it out before, or do something like that to try to figure it out?
Our committee has not asked the question of why. We base everything on previous data, and then we make that relation. We try to correlate why people do not do this. And our biggest correlation is poverty. And then, people don't count their children. Like, well, I'm a voter, I'm a taxpayer, it's just me and my husband, or just me. My children, they're just children. But no, we have to find out exactly why people are not doing this, and that's precisely what we've done.
Okay, well, I really appreciate your time today.
Yes, ma'am.
We are actually going to, that's going to be our last question of part one, but then we'll come back with part two of 2020 census.
That's great.
So thank you for joining us. We are going to come back with part two. Welcome to Parent Connection, part 2 of the 2020 census. Harry Freeman has joined us today, and he is the 2020 Census Anne Arundel County Complete Count Committee Chair. Welcome, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you for having me, Jen.
So we've been talking about the 2020 census for a little bit now. Why is this data important?
Ooh, yeah, data is very important. Any decision-making process, anybody within your local law enforcement, your government, policy leaders, politicians, they need this data so they can best make the decisions and the policies for their communities. If they don't have data, they can't make accurate decisions. They can't project future growth of the areas we live in. We can't understand who's here, who's not here, and what these people need. Some of the data is used for a SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Program. So the SNAP, I believe the federal government has a program where $70 billion gets funneled to localities through census data. And here in Anne Arundel County, we have 36,800 residents, that's children and adult, who rely on these resources. So data that we collect based on what's in the census questionnaire, your income, your education level, things like that, resources like SNAP, Title I funding, we get stuff from the federal government for Medicare, everything you can possibly think of, every action that affects your life is brought up by the data collected from the census. As discussed in our previous discussion, we want to take out the most accurate snapshot of who we have living in our communities. So the data is critical to every single decision that is made throughout our lives.
So it could help us determine, since we're here at Anne Arundel County Public Schools, it could help us determine in 5 years, we have hundreds of 0 to 5-year-olds in this particular area. This school is not going to be large enough to handle them. We need to think about what we're doing.
Absolutely correct. Do we need another school? Crofton High School is going to be the newest school in the Anne Arundel County Public School System.
Since Broadneck High School was built.
Okay.
In
Yes.
1980, I'm not exactly sure of the year, but it's the first one since.
Well, I don't think 4 or 5 people came together and said, you know what, new school. No, it was all brought about from census data. So this is very important. It changes the landscape of the areas we live in. We see, construction efforts. Roads widening. Why are roads widening? Well, we have an influx of people. How do we know that they're here? Well, things like the census. The smallest things that we live our lives not thinking about get affected by the data that we have.
So would, just thinking about the police, would
Yes,
the
ma'am.
police use that data to look at where to distribute services, like this number of people in this particular area? Because
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
So there are residences that are being built constantly.
yes.
And what the census does before they send out the questionnaires is they partner with the United States Postal Service, and they do a canvass of all the areas, all the residential areas, just to make sure that 123 Main Street is still 123 Main Street. Did the owner of an empty lot, did they build something? Do people live there now? So there is an incredible canvassing project. There's a huge campaign that verifies home addresses, that verifies where people are living, where people may be living. This whole thing is critical to our public safety. If the infrastructure doesn't allow for our fire department with their massive vehicles to get into certain places, how can they provide resources to our residents in need? The same thing with
Right.
police. We have Anne Arundel County Police. They have different divisions in different areas. Will we need another? Will we need more? That's the data.
Depends on
and
the
how it's
number of
used.
people in the count.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So as you talked about the development, there are certain areas in our county that are always developing, but then there's some massive development efforts going on now, more in the west end of our county. What about I mean, there's a lot of houses still being built right now. So in my mind, I'm thinking about they're going to be occupied next year.
Yes, ma'am.
And those people aren't going to be counted. Is that fair?
Well, so is it fair? That's very subjective. I don't know if it's fair or not. But our primary focus is to get residents within the county counted. So what we've done is we've asked ourselves that very question. How do we get people who are moving? How do we get people that are building a brand new home that will be ready and habitable within this time frame that the census will be conducted? Well, we have asked the clerk of the county court to assist us in mailing leaflets to people who open up new deeds, open up new contracts, open up new permits, so they get the census information so they're aware. We've teamed up with realtor associations and real estate associations to include this in their pamphlets, in their documentation. When people are being shown a new home, it would be wonderful to say, oh, this is going to be my new home, this is my dream home. Also, here's some information on the census. You'll be living in a new area. Your move-in date is April 1st. Let's, if you haven't already done your online questionnaire, use this opportunity to have your new home as part of the county count. That'll be fantastic. So we've thought about those questions, and we have utilized our resources to make sure we've passed that information along.
And I guess if our area has more people coming in after April 1st, then they just will not be counted until the 2030 census.
Well, again, the Department of Commerce and the Federal Census Bureau, there are multiple surveys, but for the decennial census, which is one of many surveys that is conducted by the Census Bureau, for the decennial census, when you receive your invitation to participate in mid-March, go ahead and fill it out as soon as possible. As soon as possible. It'll be in an envelope from the Census Bureau, addressed to your household, not to an individual, but to your household. So once you receive that, go ahead and fill that out.
Well, that leads me to thinking about, so I can fill it out in paper copy, and I understand that for the first time there's an online.
Yes, ma'am.
So is there some type of code in what's mailed to my house that I type in, or how does that look?
Excellent question. So there are now, for the first time in the nation's history, there will be an online option to fill out the census questionnaire. There will be two other options to do it. You can still fill it out on a paper form and submit that. You can use a telephone and you can call in all the information that's required, or you can do it online for the first time. For the online participation, the invitations that get sent in mid-March, there will be a PIN associated with the household, and that is just another level of a protection, just to make sure that this PIN is associated with this household.
So things aren't double counted.
Correct. So it's almost an authentication process in putting that PIN. If you want to do an online survey and participate that way, and you don't have the PIN, there will be other ways to authenticate who you are and that this indeed is your home. Okay. So even if you lose the PIN, you can still do it online.
So 3 ways to fill it out. What if I then don't fill it out? How does your committee remind people?
Well, our committee, we are not employed by the Federal Census Bureau.
Okay.
But what we do is we educate, we bring awareness, and we motivate people to participate. But what we can tell everyone is, if you do not fill this out, if you receive this invitation to participate and you do not fill this out, you will get notifications and notifications and notifications and reminders all the way through the summer to fill this out.
Because it's that important.
It is very important. Yes, ma'am. It's very, very important.
And then possibly could somebody end up coming to my house?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So towards the end of the reminding phase that the Census Bureau will continue to mail out, there will be a door knocking campaign. There will be a field campaign where individuals that are vetted by the Census Bureau, they are federal employees, which means they go through all the necessary background checks. They will have proper identification that is very visible, and they have been trained to conduct in-person field surveys. They will go and they will knock on your door, and they will ask if you need any assistance filling out these documents because you have not met the requirement, your civic duty, to adhere to any of the previous reminders or the online invitation. So they'll go question through question. If you fill it out and you leave a question blank and you don't complete it during any of the reminders, someone will come to your house and say, hey, you forgot to fill out this one question. Do you mind do you need any assistance in filling this out? But they will ask you for everything, even if it's just one question.
Okay.
Very committed.
So what if I'm a little hesitant to answer the door for people I don't know, and they say that they're a census taker, and they have their ID, but I mean, sometimes I don't know what their ID is supposed to look like. So how is there a way to verify or check?
The easiest way to not have someone come to your door
Is to fill it out.
is to fill out the census online, over the phone, or through the first actual paper questionnaire reminder that you'll get. But if it comes to the point where someone does knock on your door and you do feel hesitant, you can call your local census office. Maryland has 4 offices. One of them is actually in Anne Arundel County. It is in Hanover. And actually, in Hanover, one of our recruiters is the #1 recruiter in the entire country for getting these folks who will be conducting our field campaign. So her name is Georgia, and she is at the Hanover office. And she has, her and her team have, they have an entire map of the county, and they're putting the right people in the right places to make sure that these counts are done. So you can always call the Hanover office, and we can get you that information so you can share it with your audience too.
And then the Hanover office would know who's supposed to be where and when.
Absolutely.
And then, is there anything, say I have a census worker helping me fill it out, are there any types of information that the census would never ask for?
Yes, excellent question. The census takers, the questionnaire itself and the census takers who will be conducting this field campaign, if you haven't filled out any version, one, they will not ask you for anything outside of what's in the questionnaire. Now, if you see documentation or someone asks you for credit card information, do not give credit card information. The census never asks for credit card information. The census will never ask for your social security number. The census will never endorse a political candidate. This is a nonpartisan, apolitical process. It is not for or against any political party. The census will never ask you for money or donations of any kind, even if it's for a charitable organization. The census only wants to know the most basic things about who you are and who lives in this particular household.
And the reason I asked that, I know you had said that they only should ask what's on the paper, but if I am bilingual and I cannot read English, but I can read a different language, I might struggle with exactly what the question says. So to know that they would never ask for my social security number makes sense for me, because I know if they ask me for that, that's not on that paper, because you just said that.
And you bring up an excellent point about language. So the primary documentation will be in English. But other than English, the questionnaires will be in 12 other languages.
Wow.
Yes, in the questionnaire form. If you speak a language that is outside those 13 languages, I'd say 13 to include English, the census provides language assistance in 52 other languages. So our committee, we have our language experts. We have foreign language organizations that are assisting us here in Anne Arundel County. We do not want a language barrier to be a reason why residents don't fill out the census. So we have got that covered.
Okay, so just so the process is a little clearer for the people watching, if I have a language barrier and I receive my mailing that has my household number, how do I get it in a different language?
So if you've received the paper copy, that means, one, you may not have participated in the online invitation. So the online invitation will come first in the mail.
Okay.
If you do not do the online invitation, then you will get a paper questionnaire. If the paper questionnaire is not in the language you prefer, or in a language that you can understand, read, or produce an answer to, you can call the census, which is another option.
Right.
And then you will get the language assistance in many languages. Now, our committee at the county level, we know where a lot of these pockets of non-English speaking residents are. So we will be deploying people with expertise in these languages to assist. Now, people cannot fill out the census for anyone else but themselves. Now, I'm a parent, you're a parent, you can fill it out for every single person in your household, but you can't go to your neighbor's house and fill out their forms for them. You can assist them, and that is what we're here to do. We're here to assist.
Okay.
We will never fill out the form for anyone. But if they are unable to write, they cannot, they don't have the motor mechanical skills to produce an answer, then that is, a circumstance in which somebody would have to do that for them, especially if it's a field campaign person. So if someone doesn't want to open the door, then they would, but still give an answer, they will do that themselves. But I will never fill it out for you, and you should never fill it out for anyone outside of your household. But provide the assistance, absolutely.
Okay. What if, so if English is not my native language and I receive the online opportunity to fill out, and I go online, are there versions of the form there? I think I was on the site and...
Yes, and you will find every single language online that the census assists with, and that will be in 52 languages total, that covers a huge part of the globe. And if somehow you're outside of that, we have people and organizations that will be assisting folks, and as well as we'll have top cover from the Federal Census Bureau too.
Okay, so we've looked at how it's going to come, and if we don't fill it out, what could happen, because it is my civic duty to fill it out. Yes, and if I have not done my duty, a census worker could come, and I know my multiple options, and we started to talk about why this data is important. I understand why it's important, but what if a person was concerned about this data being shared with other government agencies?
Excellent question. So, as discussed in our previous discussion, all the data that you present in the questionnaire is protected for 72 years. And that is protected from every single entity, every organization. The government, the Census Bureau, does not share this information with other federal census or federal government organizations or departments. They do not share it with law enforcement, local, state, or federal. This information is only the most basic information, aggregate. So no detailed information of your name associated with anything else. It's just persons 1, 2, 3 in home X. This is the snapshot of this household. So that information is protected for 72 years under Title 13. That information does not get shared through any immigration law enforcement, FBI, local police, state police. It's not shared or sold to any private corporations. It is the most secure thing. And I know just a fun fact for those who are watching this episode, in the last version we spoke about, my 5-year-old son, this will be his first census. His data will not be available until 2092 for the 72-year buffer of when the census data becomes public.
So he will be 77 years old when his information
when his
is available.
2020 information will be made public.
I think it would be a little hard for somebody to use that against him.
Absolutely.
When he's 77. So
your information is safe. It will not be shared, and security measures should not deter anyone from participating in the census.
So, I mean, I heard you say before the aggregate is shared. So that means the school system might get, well, in this particular area, there's X number of 5-year-olds.
Correct. It won't say, Johnny Smith will be attending here, or Sarah Lee will be coming. It won't say that. It'll say we should be expecting, our schools should be expecting either a rise in populations, ages, X to Y for this school year, or a decrease in students aged, whatever to whatever for this school year. So having the most accurate count is very, very important, especially for our schools.
And I can understand that, because as a previous school administrator, we would get estimated counts for the following year. So you're basing staffing projections.
Yes, ma'am.
And you're building classes and a schedule structure around these estimates. And if they're too far off, then that can really not be in the best interest of students.
Absolutely.
Because I might have a class of, these 20 kids weren't counted, and we only have 2 second grade classrooms in this particular school. Now, where do these kids go?
Yep. Taking it a step further, a free and reduced lunch, because how much money your household makes is part of the census.
Okay.
So that data too gets filtered in. Just for the example of schools, how many students will receive free and reduced lunch? How many news articles do you see about schools going into debt for their lunch programs, and they have no way to budget to get out of those debts? These are real world issues that the census, that an accurate census, the most accurate census, can certainly mitigate.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that, as you said before, in the 2010 census, 20% of households did not fill that out.
In Anne Arundel County, yes, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes,
Yes,
in
ma'am.
Anne Arundel County. So if we're missing at any given school 20% of our kids that should be marked as free and reduced lunch that aren't, that could have a big impact on the financial structure.
An incredible impact. And another thing that we haven't discussed yet is apportionment of your representation in the House of Representatives. So legislative districts, school districts, zoning districts get drawn by people participating in the census. Now, this information will be available next year. So early 2021, your local leaders and politicians will get this, and they will redraw districts. Maryland could gain a seat in Congress. We can lose a seat in Congress. We can maintain a seat in Congress. But historically, our most vulnerable demographics are the ones who go underrepresented. And it's because they fear or don't know or have no access to filling out the census, which is why our committee is committed to educating, bringing awareness, and motivating people to do so.
And I know before we had talked about the underrepresented, most underrepresented groups, but let's just revisit them really quickly to make sure people know. Under 5?
Children aged 0 to 5 are go undercounted. Veterans, non-English speakers, our immigrant community, the elderly and handicapped, the residents at or below the poverty line.
Okay.
I mean, they're countless. Residents that live in multi-unit housing, so large apartment complexes.
Homeless?
The homeless, residents with
How would you count the homeless if they don't have a particular mailing address?
So-
And they, okay, I'm homeless,
Excellent.
and 2 of the questions, one is, one might be, what's the estimated value of your house? How long have you lived there? Is there an option that I don't have a house?
Well, our homeless population, we are prepared to count them as well, because everyone counts in the census. They would be counted through what's called service-based enumerations, and that goes through local pantries, food banks, any medical services that are dedicated to our homeless residents. We are getting assistance from Anne Arundel County Police, our partnership for children, youth, and families here in Anne Arundel County. Our director of that organization has done incredible work with our homeless residents. We have people over at BWI that help in the local area there feeding the homeless. So we have shared this information with the Federal Census Bureau so they can send people to engage in the service-based enumerations. For individuals who live maybe in tents that are tucked away in the more forested areas, Anne Arundel County Police have assisted in identifying those areas so we can get an accurate count of everyone.
So they identify the areas. Do you actually go out and? I know your committee doesn't because you guys are not employed.
And specially trained census takers would, but that is a different. They have to go through a specific training.
Sure.
But to do that, but yes, literally every living person counts, regardless of age, race, ethnicity, religion, residence status, what type of home you live in. We want to make sure we have an accurate count. It is the most egalitarian, equal thing that we do as a government is count every single person.
Okay. Now, just one group I'm thinking about is we have a lot of grandparents raising their grandchildren. That might be one place where we're losing that birth to 5.
Absolutely, absolutely. They may not be your children, but they reside or spend most of their time as their usual residents in your household. So please count everyone.
Everyone. April 1st, everyone that lives in my household.
Well, April 1st is an arbitrary day, but that is Census Day. You want to make sure that you count people mid-March. We'll have the invitations to participate. April 1st is Census Day, and then the reminders will start to come. So you'll get it done as soon as possible. I can't stress that enough.
Civic duty.
Civic duty, yes, ma'am.
I can do my duty. So we have time for one more question. And we just reviewed the timeline, but I was thinking about what if our audience wants more information? Where would they go to seek more information, either at the national level or county level or state level in the census?
The easiest website to remember would be 2020census.gov. You go to 2020 census.gov and just rummage through whatever you want. There's wonderful information. If you go to aacounty.org, which is our Anne Arundel County website, you will find links to census, and you can see precisely what our committee is doing. So you have multiple options at the federal level and at the county level to see what's going on at both ends of the scope.
Okay. Well, I just learned so much. I really appreciate your time. I cannot wait until I get my mailing in March to go online and fill it out.
I can't wait to do that either.
I will be on top of it. So we really appreciate your time. I know you have a very busy schedule, and thank you for the knowledge that you've shared with all of our watchers.
Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you for joining us for another edition of Parent Connection.